Our reader for today is Julie C. from Virginia. I want to thank you, Julie, for your service to the group.
What fear has hidden still is part of you. Joining the atonement is a way out of fear. The Holy Spirit will help you reinterpret everything that you perceive as fearful and teach you that only what is loving is true. Truth is beyond your ability to destroy, but entirely within your ability to accept. It belongs to you because as an extension of God, you created it with him. It is yours because it is part of you, just as you are a part of God, because he created you. Nothing that is good can be lost because it comes from the Holy Spirit, the voice for creation. Nothing that is not good was ever created and therefore cannot be protected. The atonement is the guarantee of the safety of the kingdom, and the union of the sonship is its protection. The ego cannot prevail against the kingdom because the sonship is united in the presence of those who hear the Holy Spirit's call to be as one. The ego fades away and is undone.
So we're in that opening paragraph, it makes reference to two types of perceptions. Those perceptions that are good and perceive good, and those perceptions that are false and perceive fear. So we need to address the things that have been perceived as fearful. The Holy Spirit will help you reinterpret everything that you perceive as fearful, for what has been perceived as fearful has been hidden and is still part of you. This is what splits the mind. That which you perceive with fear, you remains part of your mind. It's in your memory of your lower mind and interferes with your perception of miracle impulses. And so healing is the emptying out or the clearing out of those fearful perceptions. And you can't do that by yourself. You need the Holy Spirit to do these things. Once the fearful perceptions are cleared out, only that which is good remains a part of you. So there's no interference between miracle impulses and Holy Spirit teachings. They flow naturally into your conscious mind. There's no interference. This is the healed mind or the undivided mind. And we know that the ego cannot prevail against such a state because the sonship is united. Comment from Noel?
I find the last sentence very uplifting because generally I've had the perception that it's always a battle with the ego. And like what Susie says, get away, get away, get away from me. But it's like to relax and just accept the Holy Spirit's call. It says the ego fades away. We don't have to be aggressive or warlike against the ego.
True. Matter of fact, any aggression or attempt to wrestle with the ego will only inflame your mind with those thoughts and perceptions. Rich?
I don't know. Well, I do want to say, I'll just tie that first couple sentences there into what is healing. Healing is oneness with God in terms of everything that means, in terms of, joyous, conflict-free, the Jesus mind, the Christ mind. That's what healing is the atonement, knowing that oneness with God. There's other things to say about that, but truth cannot be destroyed. So God himself has made each person in truth in terms of who they really are, in terms of being a Christ-like being. So we make up this ego stuff, which is resentments, grievances, petty angers, things of this nature. We make that up as we go along in life, and it's not true in that sense, and I do see a process, the ego fades away. It's, while on the one hand, it was never really made, the word really means something there, because, it's a process to truly allow the ego to go away completely and things of that nature.
Okay, thank you. Susie?
There was a line yesterday in yesterday's lesson, and lesson was, I seek but what belongs to me in truth. If we're going chronologically, that was my lesson. And there was a line that really jumped out at me, which I think is the essence of the issues for me. Yet must there be a place made ready to receive his gifts. So for me, all of the theoretical talk in the text, I always say the art and the science, right? So it all always goes back to my willingness. I had a little fit with my ego in the middle of the night, and it kind of reminded me of what Heidi said last week. Like, if I know what it is and I don't want it to be there, and of course I know, but something was going on, with my ego, and I was asking to have my thoughts replaced and know the problem so it can be solved. I know I was in a place somewhere of separation. Just because I know all of these things, that's why I have to do the workbook lessons every day, over and over and over again. So as this line says, there is a place where I am truly ready to receive all of these gifts.
Yeah, thank you for recalling that line. It's so true. The place is always there. The question is, will your consciousness, are you willing to enter into that place this hour, today, at some point when you need it, to enter into that place? And it really does, to underscore things that have been said already, when you enter into that place, the ego really does fade away. It's like it's not there anymore because you're in a different place. Richard?
Yeah, hi. I don't know why something came to me last night when I woke up. It was about the Course in Miracles, and what it is, it said to me that this course is a spiritual vacuum cleaner. In other words, all my false beliefs. I have an ego, and I have a healthy ego. We were talking about that earlier. Before I manufactured all these things that I needed in order to be fulfilled. It says well, we just read it, or we read earlier, excuse me. The ego cannot prevail against the kingdom because the sonship is united. So what it is it's saying to me, let go of my false beliefs and get involved. Stay out of opinions, which if I'm asleep, my opinions come up. If I'm asleep, my judgments come up.
Mm-hmm.
And of my opinions and perceptions. So I'm conditioned to feel this course. What the course is to be reminded for me that I am the son of the whatever we call it, the Father, or I like to use the word creator. I do. It gets me out of the words. I fight with words. And I pick up the dictionary, and I think the word, I just learned it. It's called heterodoxical, which means I can be I can be not so much, well, with anger, I'm contemptuous. With I need to stay in the mix, and I don't know. Today I was with someone, and he's a singer, and we would laugh, and I started singing. I thought I sounded good, and everyone said, "Richie, you can't sing." I didn't take it personally like I once did. I just started laughing, but my ego was fighting to get involved at the superego, that I was something that I really wasn't.
Mhm. All right, my
So
brother.
where that is, I'm not sure. But I hope it ties into this, because I want part of this course. My ego doesn't, though.
That's for none of our egos want this course. Matter of fact, this is the last thing the ego wants, is to be exposed to this course.
It's the last house on the block.
Thanks for sharing, Richard. All right,
you.
so I was going to say a little bit about, it says everything that you perceive is hidden and still part of you, and don't really have time right now to go into it, but we will say that those, all that you perceive with fear is stored in the preconscious, also referred to as a superficial subconscious part of your mind, where it can be triggered and brought back up. This is the area that we're looking to undo and have fade away when through our willingness to let go of those ideas and give them over to the Holy Spirit. Let's go on in our reading.
What the ego makes, it keeps to itself. And so it is without strength. Its existence is unshared. It does not die. It was merely never born. Physical birth is not a beginning. It is a continuing. Everything that continues has already been born. It will increase as you are willing to return the unhealed part of your mind to the higher part, returning it undivided to creation. I have come to give you the foundation, so your own thoughts can make you really free. You have carried the burden of unshared ideas that are too weak to increase, but having made them, you did not realize how to undo them. You cannot cancel out your past errors alone. They will not disappear from your mind without the atonement, a remedy not of your making. The atonement must be understood as a pure act of sharing. That is what I meant when I said it is possible, even in this world, to listen to one voice. If you are part of God and the sonship is one, you cannot be limited to the self the ego sees.
So there's a line in here that's helpful to understand what happens when to our mind when it heals. So the Course says that the ego essentially has hijacked a part of our mind and occupies that area. When we are healed, you return the unhealed part of your mind to the higher part, returning it undivided to creation. So it's not like you get a lobotomy. It's just that the ego vacates, actually you withdraw power from that part of your mind, from giving the ego power in that part of your mind. The ego fades, and then that portion of your mind is repurposed once again to the higher part, which returns it undivided to creation. So that is the healed state, when the part of your mind that is occupied with ego thoughts is returned to the higher part of your mind. This is what we call freedom. Until then, you'll carry the burden of ego thoughts, of unshared ideas that cannot be increased. But having made them, you did not realize how to undo them. These ego perceptions, perceptions of fears, are of your own making, and you don't know how to undo them because you cannot cancel out your past errors alone. They will not disappear from your mind without help, without the atonement. And so this program is one of accepting a gift from the Holy Spirit that will help to undo this relationship that our mind has to those false perceptions. And it is possible to do so even in this world, although many people will not complete this learning journey in this world. It's what he said earlier. It is possible to listen to only one voice, but as we read in the previous section, it takes great learning and unlimited willingness to hear only one voice. All right, let's go on.
Every loving thought held in any part of the sonship belongs to every part. It is shared because it is loving. Sharing is God's way of creating, and also yours. The ego can keep you in exile from the kingdom, but in the kingdom itself, it has no power. Ideas of the spirit do not leave the mind that thinks them, nor can they conflict with each other. However, ideas of the ego can conflict because they occur at different levels and also include opposite thoughts at the same level. It is impossible to share opposing thoughts. You can share only the thoughts that are of God and that He keeps for you. And of such is the kingdom of heaven. The rest remains with you until the Holy Spirit has reinterpreted them in the light of the kingdom, making them too worthy of being shared. When they have been sufficiently purified, He lets you give them away. The decision to share them is their purification.
So you might not have caught it, but there's really three types of perception. There's perceptions completely based on fear, devoid of any light. There's perceptions completely based on love, devoid of any fear. And then there's perceptions that combine fear and love together. So what happens to each one of them? The perceptions completely based on fear have no meaning and no value. They are hidden in you. And as they come up, if it re-arise into your mind, you are given the chance to hand them over to the Holy Spirit and become free of them. The perceptions, that's one perception. The perceptions that are completely based on love, the Holy Spirit retains for you forever. They remain a part of you. And it says here in a very cosmic statement that every loving thought that is held in any part of the sonship belongs to every part. So every loving thought that you ever have or had belongs to the one mind of creation. It belongs to the entire sonship. This is a cosmic thought. It's doesn't belong to you privately and separately, but it belongs to the union of all minds. And then the third type of perception is the one that mixes fear and love together. And it tells us here what happens. it remains with you until the Holy Spirit has reinterpreted them in the light of the kingdom, making them too worthy of being shared. First, they have to be sufficiently purified. For in other words, the Holy Spirit has to dissipate all the notions of fear that are there, so that only what remains is perceptions based on love. And then they too are available for you to give to the higher mind, to the mind of creation. The decision to share them is their purification. So when they are worthy to be shared with the mind of creation, that in itself is your part for them to be purified. The Holy Spirit waits on your willingness to have them purified before she will do her task. So 3 different types of thoughts with 3 different combinations. Fearful thoughts, gone forever. Combinatorial thoughts get purified when you're ready to share them and have them purified. And holy, loving thoughts are shared by all of creation. And we would maintain that every perception that's ever occurred falls into one of those 3 categories. That there's not a 4th category. There's love, there's fear, and there's combinatorial love and fear. Kathy?
So I guess I never thought of it this way. I sort of study the course and then I go outside and go into work or go to my neighbor and talk. And I never really thought about asking Holy Spirit to purify my thoughts. I know this is something that she just does before I speak. You know, I'm starting to think it's meaningless when I share from the ego to anyone, right? And I, in the course, I think says, I don't even know. I don't even know if I'm sharing meaningless thoughts or not.
If you pay close attention to how you feel,
Yeah.
you'll at some level detect that feels a little off. That was not my highest self speaking there.
Yeah. So just the vigilance, right? We just have to be vigilant about everything.
It's being attuned to your soul, Kathy. So when you really can, when you're interacting with someone, if you kind of go off into the lower mind, it really is a shift that if you're paying attention, you can sense, oh, that wasn't my highest self there. That is probably needs purification. Yeah, it's not so much to make a judgment, but to be aware of what you're teaching. Heather?
I love what you just shared, Kathy, because for me, it's exactly that. The first, like Jonathan said, the first step is awareness. The vigilance is to say, oops, I just did it again. And then the awareness is the correction. The awareness to say, now how should I do it instead? So it's getting the do-over. The vigilance is oops. And then the awareness is how to do it over for me.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you. Susie?
So I just have a question, Jonica. I know when I have unloving thoughts or unforgiving thoughts or ego thoughts, you know, I ask the Holy Spirit to purify those thoughts so I don't even have them anymore. You know, I don't want those thoughts even to come into my mind. And so I'm just looking, I guess, for some clarification with that, because like so many of my fear thoughts are, like Heather calls it, my poofer, are just gone, right? And I can go about my day and I could be having thoughts and I just say, no, these are not loving thoughts. I don't want them. I don't even want them, Holy Holy Spirit, can you
yes.
help?
Yes.
Okay, so,
So let me try to put the discernment in there. There's two things can happen. Let's say I lose patience with somebody. No words are said, but I'm just like really irritated that they don't move faster. Okay, so that's a perception. I've actually made a judgment that they're not behaving the way I want them to. Now, at that moment, if I just completely forget about it, my attention shifts onto the next thing, that perception has been saved. That's what we read in the first paragraph. It's still a part of me. Or what you were referring to, Susie, is I notice right in the moment that I'm the one that's got the problem, that I'm unhappy with somebody else. And I notice that that's my ego. I accept responsibility for producing that thought and immediately say, Holy Spirit, I would not keep this thought. Please, the word, I'm making up words, take this from me, purify it. But you immediately engage the Holy Spirit. And the third step, though, it needs to be more than, this is the thing that we've been talking about the last few sessions, is then you need a few seconds where you actually receive that into your heart and soul, receive the Holy Spirit's peace into your mind. Because if you don't wait for that third phase of having a changed mind, you're merely using mantras. No to this, yes to the Holy Spirit, thank you, I'm done. It's just a mantra. It's not a change in you. The change is when, as we read earlier, the ego fades and it's replaced by a state of mind that we would associate with peace and serenity. Very important to get to that third stage. I spent several years just doing the mantra thing. And so it became more of a cognitive exercise rather than actually a change within me. And so it's an inner healing process, as you all know. Heather?
Yeah, you just said it. It's the, don't stop until you have peace. As soon as I feel peace, I know it's been exchanged and it's real.
Indeed. Indeed. Thank you. Richard? Oh, we're not getting you, buddy.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
Go ahead.
For me, like a mantra is just another form of chatter.
Right.
It may work for the first few seconds but it's okay. But what I'm seeing is my words are just concretized, like concrete
Right.
thoughts.
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to do is get out of my mind, out of my thoughts. But then I feel like I'm swimming in the deep side of the pool and I'm going to drown. I don't like being vulnerable.
Lack of control. Yep.
Yeah, out of control. And
Right.
I'm ensconced with my old ideas. And what it is for me, I have an emotional involvement in what I say with my old ideas. In breaking that link, that
Right.
steel link,
Right.
has been very challenging. I know for me, I'm doing it right now as we speak, and I'm laboring. I know tomorrow morning after saying this, I'm going to feel a lot better.
Uh-huh. Good. Good. Okay. Thank you, brother.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is an it is an ancient chain. But what we learned a little while ago, it only seems to have power because we give it the power of our faith and belief. We reinforce it. in and of itself, it has no power. But because we've embraced it for so long, that is what keeps it going.
If I can just give a visual graphic, it's like the man standing there after a tornado where his house used to be, and he's standing there with nothing. And that's what this work is doing me. The house that I built. So that's a visual on that.
Yeah, no, that's a strong one. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to go on.
I heard one voice because I understood that I could not atone for myself alone. Listening to one voice implies the decision to share it in order to hear it yourself. The mind that was in me is still irresistibly drawn to every mind created by God, because God's wholeness is the wholeness of his Son. You cannot be hurt, and do not want to show your brother anything except your wholeness. Show him that he cannot hurt you and hold nothing against him, or you hold it against yourself. This is the meaning of turning the other cheek.
Mm-hmm. So this brings us to what I would call an intermediate advanced lesson. It's not one that your ego wants to hear. And it's not one that many course students readily take to, but we don't want to gloss over it because of its centrality to this program. It's the idea, to paint the picture, the ego wants you to be totally preoccupied with your own mind as the notion of a separate identity. Me, my mind, my perceptions, my thoughts, my feelings, my body, my story, my control, blah, blah, blah. In contrast to that idea, because that's a separate mind that we just described, is the idea of a one mind of all creation. It's an entirely different concept. And every human being that's ever had an ego thought is identified with a separate mind. So it's a learning to identify with the one mind. It says that Christ heard the one voice because he understood he could not atone for himself alone. It wasn't an individual private mind journey. It was on behalf of the entire sonship. Listening to one voice implies a decision to share it so that you're not alone, but that you are connected. It's the mind that is drawn to every mind created by God. And therefore, it is a shift from an egocentric point of view. Me, my thoughts, my feelings, my history, my control. It's a shift from that into what is said in other places of the course to be the united will of the sonship. It's the creation of a whole. In fact, we read last week that you cannot understand yourself alone. By yourself, you have no meaning at all. It would be you isolated from everything else. You have no meaning at all. You can only understand yourself in the context of your relationship to the whole. This is often referred to as the part and the whole. And so this shift is not one that most students are willing to even entertain maybe the first or second time through, because this would be a whole scale shift in how you think of yourself now as a part of something greater, as a part of a whole, and no longer thinking of yourself only as an individual. This is why A Course in Miracles is so deep. This is, they have a term, depth psychology, in the field of psychology. This is as deep as it gets, friends. This is shift from identifying with yourself as an individual human being to identifying with yourself as part of the mind of all creation. And that's a shift you cannot do by yourself. That is not an intellectual undertaking. We've just kind of explained in a quick fashion the intellectual framework, but that's nothing compared to the internal rewiring that is necessary to actually experience that. And one final comment, the reason why you're asked to spend 5 minutes every hour with the workbook lessons is so that you gladly and willingly allow the ego to fade and embrace the Holy Spirit's mind as your own mind. You have to reinforce that decision again and again until eventually the old habit that Richard spoke about being chained to the old habits of thinking fades, becomes weaker and weaker, and the relationship of yourself to the whole mind of the Holy Spirit becomes stronger and stronger. Needs to be reinforced. Noelle?
I find I don't want to give up my individual special identity.
Right.
And I can see that, especially from what you were just saying,
Yes.
that really gets in the way.
Yes. To use the language Noelle just said, I spent my whole life creating a special identity, and now you're suggesting that I abandon it, that I've invested all these years into that, and you're suggesting I let it go for something that, as Richard said, I'm in the deep end of the pool. I'm not in control anymore. This is not territory that I am familiar with. And again, you cannot do that, such a thing alone. You must accept the atonement of the Holy Spirit. It's the only way this can be done. Susie?
Yeah, that's why for me, the part in special relationships and all of that, brought all this out for me, because I was having a major special relationship with my ego. So, and what you just said is so true. And I we were raised with this individuality concept.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Susie's great because she's a rebel, or, a lone wolf, and that serves her. And it's in diametrically the opposite. So it's really an undoing of a thought system, like I said, has been with me for decades. But this is most definitely a more peaceful, better way.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Okay, so that is the program, is letting go, letting it fade. It can only be done with your willingness. And even if you're consciously intend to do your lessons and willing, it still is going to require more of that than you just intellectually making a choice. All right, I'm going to do this every day. It's going to be almost a moment by okay, not almost. It's actually going to take the form of a moment by moment decision, including while you're in this class. The moments you spend in this class, you're actually in any given moment deciding whether or not you're more in your ego perception or more in your higher mind perception. Every moment you're somewhere in there, and the Course says that you withdraw from the ego by degrees. So Noel, when we say it fades with experience. It's constraint is not time, it's with experiences where you're willing to let it go. And you can do that 20 times a day, be willing to let the ego go. So that would be accumulating a lot of experiences versus once in the morning and once in the evening would be maybe only twice a day. So we need to accumulate many experiences. It's called quantitative reinforcement, again and again and again. The workbook lessons are quantitative reinforcement of your decision. Okay, so we started out with the lesson about teaching. Let's revisit that.
Teaching is done in many ways, above all by example. Teaching should be healing because it is the sharing of ideas and the recognition that to share ideas is to strengthen them. I cannot forget my need to teach what I have learned, which arose in me because I learned it. I call upon you to teach what you have learned, because by doing so, you can depend on it. Make it dependable in my name, because my name is the name of God's Son. What I learned, I give you freely, and in the mind that was in me rejoices as you choose to hear it.
So let's give an example. Let's say there's a person that you knew in childhood, but you had your differences and stopped talking. You don't want to have anything to do with that person anymore. And that's just kind of never changed, because just time and distance and everything. Well, you can make a decision to let go of your perception of them as wrong or whatever, however, to let go of your judgment of them and pray not only for them, but for your own forgiveness of them. And all this can be done even without their being around. So that you're actually now, where did you learn this forgiveness? You learn this forgiveness. It's a sharing of ideas. That you've learned it here and in other places to forgive. And now you're strengthening that idea by practicing it yourself, by forgiving somebody else. I've shared before that I did this with my father. He passed away from this world, and 3 years later, I had this complete letting go of all my criticisms of him, and I finally forgave him completely. Now, he wasn't on this world, so we never exchanged all those words, but it's really wasn't necessary for the healing of my own heart and mind in relationship to him. So, but by learning to forgive him, it opened the doors of forgiveness for me, really, in a major way. As you can imagine, holding resentments against a parent will then repercuss into other relationships. Teaching is healing. It's the sharing of this idea of forgiveness and the recognition that when you extend them through yourself, they will strengthen in you. We're actually doing this all the time. You can do the same thing with resentments and judgments and grievances. You can strengthen them in your mind by repeating them. So we're actually always teaching something that we believe, whether it be in for grievances or forgiveness. Noel?
Would you say something about how atonement relates to these ideas, please?
Yeah, so atonement is a process that begins with the forgiveness, with an individual's forgiveness, and extends the outer limits of the idea, Noel, is the atonement of all the entire sonship that is complete at the end of time, where all souls return to the one mind. That's the end of atonement. But we tend to focus on the initial stages where one individual accepts the reunion of their mind with the Holy Spirit. So, and it has the same phases to it as for everyone. The root, the archaic meaning of the word atone is to undo. So it begins with the undoing of the perceptions of the ego and the willingness to change your mind, offer those perceptions of the ego to the Holy Spirit, and have her replace them with a change of mind. And so that's theory, Noel. Like I can do that, say those words easily. But the third phase is the actual acceptance of the atonement. It's the allowing it to penetrate your heart and soul below just what your mind has said, but you actually become part of it so that you are part of the one mind of all creation once again.
Some schools talk about atonement as at one-ment. Is this part of the course teaching?
Yeah, so that emphasizes the third phase that I talked about, where you allow yourself to be touched in your heart and soul and unite with the one mind of all creation. That's the third phase. But Noel, without undoing the thoughts of the ego, and without your willingness to have it replaced by the correction of the Holy Spirit, we can't get to that at one-ment. So I think that's an oversimplification just to say atonement means at one-ment, because it assumes you can just go from hatred to oneness just by saying I accept the atonement. And that's just a cognitive process that doesn't really touch the heart and soul. We'll have more to say on this as we get into later chapters. We're not done with the atonement. Heather?
Yeah, I like the question, because for me, what I'm learning is that atonement is I have to work to the place that I can see how I'm like that also. and the other person, how and where am I doing the same thing that he or she's doing? How can I recognize that I'm one with them when they're in their best or when they're in their worst, that I am one with them and I understand how it feels to be where they are, then I'm in tune with that. And then also to come out of that and bring them with me to the place that we don't have to be there. But it's like the old saying, the famous yogi that said, every time he sees someone, he says, "Oh, I am that. I am that too," instead of excluding myself and saying, "I would never do that." So you work to find the what place of oneness. You say, "Oh, I can totally see that I'm that too." Then I'm at one, and then I can attune and help bring my brother back to the sonship to say, we don't have to remain there. This is not who we are, but I can't do it alone. I have to go there and make sure that I really feel what it's like to be that too.
Thank you. Well said. Let's go on.
The Holy Spirit atones in all of us by undoing, and thus lifts the burden you have placed in your mind. By following him, you are led back to God where you belong, and how you find the way except by taking, and how can you find the way except by taking your brother with you? My part in the atonement is not complete until you join it and give it away. As you teach, so shall you learn. I will never leave you or forsake you, because to forsake you would be to forsake myself and God who created me. You forsake yourself and God if you forsake any of your brothers. You must learn to see them as they are and understand they belong to God as you do. How could you treat your brother better than by rendering unto God the things that are God's?
I don't really have any comments here. We'll go on.
The atonement gives you the power of a healed mind, but the power to create is of God. Therefore, those who have been forgiven must devote themselves first to healing, because having received the idea of healing, they must give it to hold it. The full power of creation cannot be expressed as long as any of God's ideas is withheld from the kingdom. The joint will of the sonship is the only creator that can create like the Father, because only the complete can think completely, and the thinking of God lacks nothing. Everything you think that is not through the Holy Spirit is lacking.
So a moment ago, when Noel asked about the atonement, we said there's this macrocosmic phase of the atonement that includes everyone, includes the end of time. Well, when we're on that end of the spectrum, there's a distinction we need to make, Noel. The atonement is really the solution to the problem of separation. So the atonement itself is a repair job. If there were no separation, there were no need for atonement. So you can see the atonement has its place only to repair the beliefs in separation. And then once that's been done at the end of time, this is on a cosmic scale, then there's that phase of creation is concluded, and creation transitions to what we call the power of creation. It goes back to the original state, before there was a separation. So there's a distinction to be made there between the role of the atonement and the original state. It's not, this is a finer point perhaps that most people won't be too concerned about. So the course is very practical, and it brings us back to the here and now, which is our own forgiveness and our need to practice forgiveness with others. Those who have been forgiven must devote themselves first to healing, and then having learned the idea of healing, being willing to share it. That's the function that we're preoccupied with now. So, Noel, that's the phase of the atonement which is most urgently needed at this time, is for each and every one to receive the idea of a healed mind. What does it mean to have a healed mind? And then to recognize that we are a part of that program of bringing healing to our own mind as well as to other minds. We can't do it by ourselves. The things that will occur later on will take care of themselves. It's a return to oneness. So there are deeper levels of understanding to this idea of atonement, and we'll cover them kind of here and there as they come up within the course. It's just the way it's laid out, is the ideas appear every few pages rather than all in one place. It would probably be too much to have it all come in at once. Okay.
How can you who are so holy suffer? All your past, except its beauty, is gone, and nothing is left but a blessing. I have saved all your kindnesses and every loving thought you ever had. I have purified them of the errors that hid their light and kept them for you in their own perfect radiance. They are beyond destruction and beyond guilt. They came from the Holy Spirit within you, and we know what God creates is eternal. You can indeed depart in peace because I have loved you as I loved myself. You go with my blessing and for my blessing. Hold it and share it, that it may always be ours. I place the peace of God in your heart and in your hands to hold and share. The heart is pure to hold it, and the hands are strong to give it. We cannot lose. My judgment is as strong as the wisdom of God, in whose heart and hands we have our being. His quiet children are his blessed sons. The thoughts of God are with you.
So we started out today talking about the two different types of perceptions. The perceptions that we make in fear wind up being hidden in our mind and are still part of us. And then the perceptions we make with love are a part of our eternal creation. They will refer to this later in the course as your creations. And so it assures us that every loving thought, every kindness, and all the beauty that you've ever encountered in your life is saved, and nothing is left except the blessing. Translated, all those loving thoughts and kindness are a part of your soul forever. They are you. They are your creations. They are the part of you that will live on forever. And that's not to say that they were all free of errors, because we're not at that state of completion yet where we're completely free of those thoughts. But even though there were errors, the errors have already been purified. Anything that was an interference factor with your loving thoughts has been purified. And what it says is that it awaits your acceptance. It's kind of already been rectified, but it requires your willingness to accept that correction, to accept the healing. So it waits upon you. So these thoughts you're beyond your destruction, beyond guilt. And in fact, so here's a beautiful concept. Where do your loving thoughts come from? When you have kindness towards someone else, where does that come from? Well, it says here, they came from the Holy Spirit within you. And those thoughts last forever. They are not transient. They are not delusions or illusions. They are a part of you. And again, it will refer to this later as your creations. This is the creation of your soul. So, and then there's this beautiful benediction. I place the peace of God in your heart and your hands to hold and share. The heart is pure to hold it. The hands are strong to give it. We can't lose. My judgment is as strong as the wisdom of God, in whose heart and hands we have our being. And this, I'd like you to ponder this line here later for the rest of the day. His quiet children are his blessed sons. His quiet children. Notice it didn't just say his children are his blessed sons. It says his quiet children are his blessed sons. And so this reminds me of that third phase of healing after we've had our grievance, after we've decided to let it go and give it to the Holy Spirit. Then that third phase is letting your mind be changed by the peace of the Holy Spirit, where you enter into a meeting place, a quiet place, where your heart and your soul open and reaffirm that that's who you truly are. That place. So invite you to visit there regularly today, in whatever form may be available to you. So that is all the reading we are going to do today. I hope that was helpful. This entire chapter, you can tell, has a richness of spirituality woven into it. It's not all obvious to the meaning that it has. I'm quite confident that if you read it again in a year from now, it'll have a meaning much more penetrating than it does today. This is the nature of these things. So be sure to spend some time reviewing your notes and the parts that were particularly spoke to you today. So thank you, Julie, for your reading today. And thank you all for your comments. Practice the quietness. His quiet children are his blessed sons. Make sure you take moments today to open your hearts and your hands to receiving the gifts that are available to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Peace and love.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Julie,
guys.
for reading.
Thank you, Joan.
Okay, bye, guys. Have a nice weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Felicia, where are you?
I'm at a friend's